But there was one other thing that happened on the show, which was the announcement of the major new blockbuster signing that Tony Khan was hyping up on social media, and it turned out, to the surprise of no one, to be Will Ospreay. Will Ospreay is All Elite. And at the post-show scrum last night, Ospreay said, when he was asked about a potential third match with Kenny Omega, he said he'd love to do it, but he would also love to get in the ring with Andrade El Idolo and Miro. He also mentioned MJF and Jay White as potential opponents he would like to step into the ring with. And when he was asked if he considered any other promotion besides AEW, he said he wanted to hear everybody out, even Impact. But he wanted to do what was best for his family. Now, per Sean Ross Sapp on Fightful Select, this move happened well before Ospreay's New Japan deal was up. I don't know about well. I mean, his New Japan deal is up either at the end of January or sometime in February. This is something that he himself has said before that wasn't a work. That's when his New Japan deal is up, because he is still under contract to New Japan. The New Japan contract is not suddenly null and void. He is still technically under contract to New Japan for a couple more months. And I said, when people were kind of disqualifying him because of that, I said, well, this is a situation where these two companies work together. It is not out of the realm of possibility that they would reach a deal or an understanding of some kind. They do work together. They have a good working relationship. And they would allow Will Ospreay to go out and negotiate a new deal if he had a new deal that he wanted to work out with a company like AEW. And that's exactly what happened here. And Sean Ross Sapp said that, again, on that subject, his deal with New Japan is not up until early next year. And they're told that Ospreay had communicated to them that he was not re-signing with them. He had made up his mind. He was not going to re-sign with New Japan. And he got their blessing to go sign with AEW, because they have worked together for a number of years. So that relationship is what allowed this to happen. And Ospreay, as part of this deal, is going to be able to work select dates for New Japan while he is under AEW contract. Which was always one of the reasons I thought AEW had the better chance of signing him than WWE. Yeah, I think he woke up to the idea of maybe signing with WWE. That's where he can make a lot of money and become a big name potentially. And I think he genuinely was open to any potential offer from them. That's why he hired that big super agent. He had Barry Bloom representing him, because Barry Bloom was going to get him the best possible deal. But it was reported that the negotiations between him and AEW, they became very active in the early part of the fall. Initially, he expressed a desire to continue residing in the UK, but later on he expressed an openness to exploring all options, including a potential move to the US. And Fightful learned that Ospreay is going to be able to maintain his UK residence as part of this new deal. He was in Los Angeles leading up to Full Gear. He got there on Friday at some point. During this time, he was kept separate from everybody else, and he made his arrival shortly before the beginning of the pay-per-view part of the show. And the contract had not been signed until that day. So I don't know if the official contract was what he signed in the ring or if it happened at the building that morning, but that day is when the contract was officially signed. Now, they can confirm that WWE was in contact with Ospreay's representation. Again, that would be Barry Bloom. The conversation wasn't much of a secret within the company, as they were looking to see what kind of schedule and possible relocation would happen. And there was also interest from Impact, although Fightful has not heard how far those talks got. WWE sources they spoke with claimed that they had not gotten an official word of the signing, but they figured by this week that he was AEW bound, and that's where things were left. So there were a lot of rumors going around about who this big signing was going to be. It was said to be somebody who was well respected by much of the AEW roster. Mercedes Moné was my first thought. That was the first thought I think a lot of people had. The only reason Ospreay wasn't my first thought was because of the New Japan contract situation. We saw Mercedes in the crowd at Wembley Stadium at All In. They showed her multiple times on screen. And right about now, she should be, if she's not fully recovered from her ankle injury, she should be nearing, I would think, a full recovery. So the timeline seemed to make sense if it was going to be her. And it turned out not to be her. Now, Tony Khan was asked about her at the media scrum and said they've had conversations before and he would love to bring her in. And I still think in the end that they will bring her in, even if it's some kind of deal where I don't know if she would want to still sign something with Bushiroad and do stuff with Stardom, but it would allow her to do AEW stuff. I don't know what is in her head as far as what she's most interested in. Does she want to go back to WWE? Does she want to go work for a Triple H creatively run WWE and get back in the mix there? Or is she content to keep doing her own thing? Calling her shots and making her own schedule, and she can work AEW and get that big time exposure on television, but still have the freedom to work, with New Japan if she wants to, or do other events. Ultimately that's up to her. It's what she's most interested in. She pretty much can have her pick of the litter because everybody is going to want a piece of her when she's ready to come back. So it turned out not to be her. Goldberg is another name that was mentioned because Goldberg is very friendly with Tony Khan. Tony Khan has said in the past that he has had conversations with Bill Goldberg. And Goldberg is looking to have a proper retirement match that in his mind he never got. Last match he had, he got put to sleep by Roman Reigns in Saudi Arabia. And he hasn't been seen since, I don't think. So some people thought maybe it was him. That would have been awful to hype up this big signing, and it turns out to be Bill Goldberg. So thankfully it didn't turn out to be him. Some people thought maybe a Dolph Ziggler, who I fully expect to end up in AEW. But he's still under a non-compete. After WWE let him go in September, he won't be free until the end of December. He could potentially be at World's End. He could potentially be the devil. But it wasn't going to be him, unless he got some kind of special permission from WWE to negotiate with AEW. And a bunch of other names. Sami Callihan and Shelton Benjamin. I saw his name pop up because, the whole idea of it being somebody who was well respected. So in the end, it turned out to be one of the more predictable names. But I said this the other day. And I tend to see on my timeline maybe feedback that the average person wouldn't, because the average person has the right idea. And they don't pay attention to stuff like this. I do think I tend to see more of it just being a content creator in this space. I guess I'm exposed to it more often, or if I post a take on social media, all the drones and all the trolls and they all come out of the woodwork. But I saw this a lot when I posted something about Will Ospreay, and a lot of the sentiment on social media was that, he's not a mainstream star. He doesn't move the needle. Nobody will know who he is, right? It doesn't qualify as a big signing. What a disappointment that would be. And I that word mainstream, I see people throwing that word around a lot. And I don't understand it. Although, I should take that back, because I do understand it. I know exactly who it's coming from, and it does make more sense when you think about it in that context. But again, Tony Khan didn't say that he signed a mainstream star. He said that he signed one of the best pro wrestlers on the planet. Will Ospreay is someone who would certainly fit that bill. He is, I think, bell to bell, the best wrestler in the world today. And he may never be a mainstream star. What does that even mean, by the way? How would you define mainstream? Is it somebody who does movies? Is it somebody who does television shows? How do you even define that in today's day and age? What is your criteria for mainstream? WWE works with mainstream stars all the time. Bad Bunny, right? Bad Bunny is a mainstream star. He's one of the biggest stars in the world. One of the biggest recording artists in the world, right? Somebody like him is mainstream. Is Seth Rollins mainstream? Is Cody Rhodes mainstream? I mean, these are legitimate questions. Is Roman Reigns mainstream? If you were to ask the average Joe on the street, I could tell you what, 25 years ago, if you went on the street and asked people, do you know who The Rock is? Do you know who Stone Cold Steve Austin is? Most people probably would have heard of who those people were. If you ask people even today, Hulk Hogan, right? That's a name that has name recognition. You could say, okay, that's a mainstream name. But how is that even defined today? Because I'm willing to bet if you go on the street and those names I just mentioned, even those names, as big as they are in the wrestling business, a lot of people probably wouldn't know who they are. Does that mean they're not mainstream? Does that mean that WWE should not be utilizing them because they're not mainstream enough? This was a pro wrestling signing. This was not a celebrity signing. And whether or not he goes on to become a mainstream name for them or not, to me personally, is irrelevant. I just want to know if this is now the criteria that the IWC uses to judge all pro wrestling signings, or if we're only talking about the ones that Tony Khan tweets about. Because I could tell you, if I had the chance to sign Will Ospreay, if he was a free agent and he wanted to come work for my company, and he's still in the prime of his career, I mean, I wouldn't even think twice about it. It would just be a matter of dotting the I's and figuring out the numbers and getting it taken care of. But the reality is, there aren't very many mainstream stars anymore anyway. And if you take a Goldberg or you take a Ronda Rousey, mainstream names, I got news for you. If the big signing last night turned out to be Ronda, or if it turned out to be Bill Goldberg, it would get a lot of buzz on day one. They're not going to move the needle any more than Will Ospreay would. Maybe for one show. For one night, maybe they would. But those mainstream stars, if you sign them to a full-time contract, you think that that's going to take AEW to the next level? You think that's going to move the needle for Tony Khan? That's not going to make a lick of difference. It's on Tony Khan, if he wants to create mainstream stars, to go ahead and put his muscle behind them and create mainstream stars. I think MJF has the potential. He is the closest thing right now in that company who has the potential to be a truly mainstream crossover star. I could see him doing movies. I could see him doing so much more than what he is doing now. Whether Ospreay or not goes on to become that is completely irrelevant to me. I don't care. He is a terrific pro wrestler. I am a pro wrestling fan. I don't care if Will Ospreay does a television talk show or if Will Ospreay has a bit part in a movie. What I care about is when I'm tuning into a Full Gear or if I'm tuning into an All In at Wembley Stadium and Will Ospreay is going to be on the card, I know I'm paying attention to whatever it is that he's doing on that show because he's putting in the best work of anybody in the world right now. And that means something to me. Maybe it doesn't mean anything to you, but to me it does. And to go back to what I said before about, taking back what I said about how I don't understand it, no, I do understand it. And I know exactly where a lot of this sentiment is coming from. It's coming from the people who are WWE fans who hear that Will Ospreay signed with AEW and not WWE, and so they go with the predictable responses. He's a nobody, he's a flippy guy, he's not mainstream, nobody knows who he is, he can't cut a promo, he can't speak, right? Those same people that are saying these things would be throwing a parade for this man if he signed with WWE. In reality, it has nothing to do with how mainstream he is, and it has everything to do with the 3 initials on his contract. These people are not arguing in good faith. They're talking out of their ass. Will Ospreay is a great signing for Tony Khan. One of many. He certainly signed a lot of people, and there were a lot of people under contract who were floating around not doing much. Will Ospreay cannot be one of those people. Will Ospreay is going to be one half of your Wembley Stadium main event next August. And it doesn't matter who it's against. It should be against MJF. But whether it's MJF, whether it's one last match with Kenny Omega, whether it's a first time ever match with Bryan Danielson, any of the above. That right there is one half of your Wembley Stadium main event.